Hello, good morning. It's Rosemary Manners here to fill you in on a bit more health, the next nugget of health for this year's health cheat sheets. So today we're uncovering the link between emotional stress and disease. Because as you know, we don't want disease. We don't want dis-ease in our body. And so to do that, I'm going to suggest that we create an emotional plan. So a plan to move us away from disease by looking at our emotions. So we're creating an emotional plan. Have you ever had one of those before? No, I never had one of those before I started considering it as an aspect of health. So I'm going to read out a saying from Viktor Frankl just to put it in the context of what we're doing. And what we're doing is not new. A lot of people have been talking about it for a lot of time, but I'm not sure in the naturopathy room when we were creating our plans for health whether we've actually sat down and talked about an emotional plan. So here goes Viktor Frankl's quote: "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." So we're going to head towards growth and freedom, head away from disease, and that's the plan today. So let's start from the top and make it really simple so that you can really apply this easily and effortlessly. So what's that say? An event happens. So this is your trigger, this is your event. So an event happens. And then what happens? Then what comes next is a reaction. So you have an event and then you have a reaction. So that reaction takes maybe 90 seconds, the scientists tell us, and it could be any sort of reaction. It could be happiness, it could be anger, it could be annoyance, it could be sadness, it could be jealousy, it could be gratitude, it could be anything. So you get a response, you get a reaction, and we don't have a lot of control about it. It happens so fast. We have the event and then we have the reaction. It all happens in less than a minute. There's not a lot of time to consider how that's happening and how that's affecting your emotions. But what happens next? Next, you get a response. Can you see that? So you get an event, you get a reaction, and you get a response. And it's the response that we can change. It's a response that we can put space in, and it's a response to any event where we can create a plan to lead us away from disease. So that sounds really good. I really like this idea. Having an event, having a reaction, and then changing the response. And so let me give you an example. So say you and I, we're the biggest road ragers in the world. So we don't like cars. We don't like cars that get in our way. So we're driving down the highway, and a car veers in front of us. And we get angry. The reaction is anger. But then our response is beep, 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 beep. I'll think of some really swear words. I'll hoon up to the driver. I'll shake my hand. I'll get really angry. The adrenaline will run through my system. The cortisol will run through my system. My neurons will be firing in all sorts of different directions, creating big networks of anger and response. My heart will be beeping. My muscles will be going because I'm going into fight. And what's that doing for my body? It's creating inflammation. It's creating fire in my body. It's not going to healing my body. So I can sort of look at that response, and it might be not so crazy as that actual response, but there might be other areas in your life where your response is not one, and you recognize that response is not one that you'd like. So we can recognize that, and we can start considering and creating space to find another response. So on consideration, the response might be that I don't really have to have such a great reaction. And yes, even when I get the angry reaction, I don't really have to have such a gross response. So my response might be to focus on my driving, stay away from that driver, consider what I'm going to do that night rather than creating that whole neural network of brain and chemicals creating inflammation in our body. So how was that? Is that something you can relate to? Does that happen in your life in other areas? Do you get a response? Do you create responses and you look back at it and say, oh, where did that come from? Well, that's the thing. They're the things that I think you should put in an emotional plan. And you put it in your emotional plan when you see emotions that are not part of what you want. And you can create new responses, the responses that you would like. So as I've been studying this, I've been studying Dr. Joe Dispenza. You might remember him from some of the movies in the past. He's got TED Talks. He's got books out there. His actual book is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. So it's really interesting. If you'd like to do a bit more research, go and check him out. But he backs all this up with neuroscience. So there's one thing to think of it from a deep and meaningful psychological way, but we want to bring it back to the neurons. So it's like thinking, doing, being. It's your event, your reaction, and then your response. So when we learn something new, it fires neurotransmitters. We know that. And so the neurons fire. But as we remember that new response and remember how that we had the same reaction yesterday and how we learnt about this and we learnt about that, all those neurons fire together. And when those neurons fire together, they bind together. So, and they begin to always form networks. So when they start firing together, they become wired together, and that forms networks. And then these networks, every time you create a new network, and this all happens in milliseconds, you can see it up on screens when you look at these neuroscience lectures. So when all those neurons fire together and network together and create new pathways, that inside you creates a completely different response that might have been yesterday's response. And so we're forever changing, and that response will create different chemicals in our bodies and have different effect of every cell in our body and with relationship to health and wellness. So we want the neurons firing, networking, learning together, creating memories, creating neurotransmitters, and going towards the emotions that we choose. And this is all known, and you probably know about this. It's called plasticity, the plastic of the brain, and how we can change those neuro pathways and create new plastic pathways. So I've got another example for you. Is the Harvard Medical School has been studying the amygdala. I'm going to read some of this out so that you can understand it. So the place deep inside the brain is called the amygdala, and it's involved in processing your intense emotions. So that's anxiety, fear, and stress. And they might be some of the emotions that are tied up with your reactions. And so it's really interesting to see what the scientists are saying. And what they've found with this new brain imaging study is that there's a series of reactions that happen in the amygdala that they create a connection with heart attacks and your heart attack risk. So I'm going to read the next bit out. This study identifies the mechanism of links stress, artery inflammation, and subsequent risk of heart attack. Wowee. Why haven't we got an emotional plan? I want an emotional plan. Like we can take statins, we can take our fish oil, we can look at our blood pressure, but the link we're missing is having an emotional plan, because that's going to feed in. Harvard Medical Associated said that's going to feed in exactly into a risk factor with our health too. So to me, well, yes, you can take statins, yes, we can take fish oil, but having something to moderate those emotions and looking at the response you have to those emotions might be a really good idea too. What are you thinking now? Have you started thinking of your plan? So another thing you look at is kids. Like, I love watching kids. Like, those little kids that fall over and there's that silence. And already in your head, you're thinking, oh, is your leg broken? Do we need stitches? Am I going to the doctor? I wonder what specialists I know. And meanwhile, the little kid, right, that's all going in your brain, your reaction, you're responding to it. The little kid there has just got itself off and headed off in another direction. So that's another example of how an event, a reaction, a response can happen in just the simplest, easiest way. And we can look at these and we can look at where our brain networks and our neuro-linguistic pathways, and we can change them. And it takes time. Okay, it takes time. I'm always hopeful, but it does take time, and we can moderate them in the future. So I've created an action list for you. So it's 5 steps, and I'm going to read them out one by one. And these 5 steps are creating an action list for you to be able to head across your emotional plan. So number 1 is to give yourself permission to understand and own all your feelings, good and bad. So it's okay. It's okay to feel angry, and it's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to feel depressed, and it's okay to feel happy, and it's okay to feel jealous, and it's okay to feel joyful. It's okay to laugh out loud. Own them, because that's your reaction. What you can change is your response to those emotions. So keep that in mind, because that's a really core, life-changing nugget to take home. The next one, you ready for number 2? Understand that space creation and your response shapes your experiences for life. So if you create space and create a different response in any given situation, as I've explained already, your neurons work in a different way, and your experience will be completely different from the experience that you had yesterday. There you go. 1, 2. Number 3 is to experiment with your thinking, feeling loop and finding the emotions you most favour. So part of this is just seeing what's happening. So thinking, feeling, thinking what your response would be, your triggers. Start looking at it. So it's like taking a step back and watching yourself and seeing what the patterns are and seeing where you can create new emotional plans and strategies. So number 4 is to do the doing, to write down. So write down what your emotional strategies would be. Write down your plans, write down your strategies, take some action, show it to a friend, see how you can create it. And then not only create it, is come back and review it. Like review it on a monthly basis, see where you've got to, see what you're learning, see where the growth is. I'm so excited. I'm more excited than you are, but that's where we're looking. So we're looking at the growth. And number 5 is to be patient. Like, this isn't going to change overnight. You're going to have to work at it and create yourself the time and the patience, and know that half of it is just noticing those reactions. So noticing those reactions, noticing the response you have to those reactions, and keeping in mind that that's half. Once you notice it, that's half the change. Moderating the response is the other half, and yes, it will take time, but once you notice them and once you see, gosh, that rage in traffic, that's not the response that I want, once you notice that, that's halfway to healing it. So go home, be at home, start writing, write yourself a little emotional plan, write a few strategies down, review it next week, see how you're going, put some space between you and those responses, and let me know. Let me know if you can uncover your own emotional stress, the link between your emotional stress and your disease, and be able to create a way around that. Good luck. I'm so excited. I'm so excited that you're now creating an emotional plan. We've never had one of those before. Maybe you have. Maybe you have had an emotional plan. But anyway, write it down. I'm keen to know what they are. I'm keen to know how it's working for you. I love messages. I love hearing about what you're thinking. So send them to me, discuss them with me in clinic, and I'll see you next week, next Wednesday at 12 o'clock with another nugget for health. Bye for now.